John chapter 4 verse 1. So we are now here at the Mossy Forest. It's up here on the mountain. It's sure the drive here is quite, well, the road's not easy to get here. You can get here with a normal 2x2 kind of car. I think a motorbike wouldn't be better because the road is so narrow. Cars coming from, it's kind of always like living on the edge, like driving up here. And you get to the top. Now the entrance to the place is open. The entrance to the Mossy Forest is like 30 ringgit. And now I've kind of been here. I honestly don't think it's worth 30 ringgit. There are other places where you pay less for and you see a lot more beauty. So kind of, I think they're making it a little bit impossible for foreigners, tourists to really see the place. You spend a lot to get here, and then they basically make it impossible with 30 ringgits, because really it's not worth it. Not worth 30 ringgit. But that's my opinion. You might be of a different opinion if you spend so much to get up here. But the road here, the drive here is worth it, I would say, even though you don't. I mean, what do you see? You can go on hikes here and see the same kind of what you see here. So, yeah. So let's look at John chapter 4, verse 1. John chapter 4, verse 1. Now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. Okay, so what these verses tell us, these three, is the reason for Jesus going up north. Right, so in the previous chapter 2 and 3, he was in Jerusalem during the Passover. Chapter 2, chasing the people out. Chapter 3, speaking with Nicodemus. And now in this chapter, he heard that they heard, okay, the Pharisees, okay, heard that he was baptizing, and sure, that's going to, again, like they did with John the Baptist, going to create questions. And at that stage, he just didn't want, it's not that Jesus was running away, but he knew his time is not there, and it's not ready now. Nothing is in place this is not the time for these kinds of confrontations. When the time comes, the confrontation will be there. He's not going to run away from it, but at this stage, the time is not ready for that. The other thing, so the disciples, they were baptizing. We've seen it in the previous chapter as well, mentioning that Jesus was baptizing. But now in this chapter, it's just kind of clarifying, or at least whoever put these brackets in here clarified this actually not Jesus who was doing the baptizing, but his disciples doing the baptizing. Now, sure, Jesus would have been, if he was against it, he would have stopped them, right? But so we only see it mentioned in John here about this baptizing, that not John but the disciples of Jesus baptizing as well. We don't really get any explanation of why they were doing it. It's just mentioned that they were doing it. Why did Jesus allow for it? Remember, Jesus, it's still Old Testament, it's not New Testament yet. And with the introduction of the New Testament there during the Last Supper, or the implementation or the bringing in of the New Testament there at the Last Supper, things are going to change. Yes, Jesus saying go and baptize, teach, and all of that from Matthew, we see that. But that's a different kind of focus, with now everything in everything that happened, the whole story, kind of the whole thing that was kind of happening behind the scenes is then opened up too. And at this stage, it's not open yet, because Jesus hadn't died on the cross and rose from the dead yet. Okay, so the baptism is still an Old Testament baptism and not a New Testament baptism as of yet. So don't forget that even these baptisms practiced by Jesus' disciples here under the supervision ultimately of Jesus, or at least him allowing for it, is still Old Testament baptism. Okay, so then, because of this, not avoiding the conflict, because the time for facing the conflict is not there yet, he went back from Judea, where this was happening, to the north. Now, we seen that we don't exactly know. I mean, if you go to Israel and Palestine, those kinds of places, West Bank, right, then you see there's lots of kinds of places where they say John the Baptist baptized. They think it's like close to where the Jordan River flows out of the Sea of Galilee, somewhere up there. Others think it's further to the south. But here with Jesus and the baptizing going on, we see it was done in Judea. So that would mean it's further to the south, at least, okay? And we don't actually see that he did it at the Jordan, at least not from these verses, exactly where the disciples were doing this. Verse 4, and he had to pass through Samaria. Now, I mean, in a certain sense, not that he had to pass. It's not as if he couldn't go through, because what the Jews or the Israelites would do, a lot would do, not all of them, but very often because of their dislike for the Samaritans, they disliked everyone who's not like them, not Jewish. But because the Samaritans were kind of related, so they hated them in a sense more than anybody else. So some of them would like literally cross over the Jordan, go up the other side, the eastern side of the Jordan, and recross to go, so as to totally avoid the going through the land of. But in this case, Jesus, he had the choice of, but he ultimately made the choice of going straight. That would be the easiest and the fastest, understandably, road than trying to go across kind of the whole detour. Verse 5. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Right, so why all this mentioned? Okay, now there are a number of reasons why this is mentioned. And again, for me, a proof of when this was written and to whom it was written. If this was written to people years later on, that's outside, then the mention of where they came to, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because these people would have kind of maybe no geographical knowledge of. While if it was written to the people in Jerusalem, people for whom Israel, not Jacob, Israel, understandably, was very important, they would have known exactly where this place is. So by saying that Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph, they would have exactly know where all of this happened. Okay, because this was very important to them. Again, I would say they're not Jacob but Israel, but Jacob is ultimately Israel. Okay, so this is just a clear mention of. Now, this is a town of Samaria. So by mentioning this, a town in Samaria, which will ultimately show it's given by Jacob too. So therefore, it's actually their land, right? As well, this is kind of an important. Jacob gave this land to Joseph some other time. I mean, we've seen it at the end of Genesis, where there was this land, this part that he took over, right? And he said, but this belongs to, fought in a war, he got it, and he gave it to Joseph there in Genesis chapter 15. And, actually 49. Okay? And so this is the places. This is when it happened there in Genesis. So this mention of it here points back towards Genesis chapter 49, and this land belongs to. So although the Samaritans live there now, although the Jews didn't want to to go through it, but it's kind of showing that this is part of the promised land.